You ever walk away from a conversation and just think, what? What just happened? Or maybe, why didn't they get what I was trying to say? Look, we have all been there. But what if I told you that you could fundamentally change the outcome of pretty much every single interaction you have? Today, we're diving into how to take 100% control of your communication and really become a master of influence.
So let's just start with a really basic question. When you're talking to someone, one-on-one, what percentage of that whole communication process are you actually responsible for? Now, most of us, our gut reaction is to say 50-50, right? I mean, it takes two to tango. But what if that simple common assumption is the very thing that's holding us back?
Get this. The answer, according to the principles of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP for short, is 100%. Now, I know that might sound a little intimidating, but trust me, it's actually incredibly empowering. This one little shift in your mindset is the key to unlocking more effective, more successful, and way less frustrating conversations. And by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how to make this work for you.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with that big one, the 100% responsibility rule. Then, we'll look at the feedback loop that's running under the surface of every conversation. We'll see it in action with a great story about two very different outcomes. After that, we'll explore the fascinating mental filters that shape our reality. And finally, we'll pull it all together so you can start becoming a master communicator.
Okay, first up, the 100% responsibility rule. Now, this is not about blaming yourself when things go sideways. It's the exact opposite. It's all about recognizing that you have the power to steer the conversation toward the outcome you want, because you have total control over your own words, your own actions, and your own reactions. This whole rule is built on three really powerful ideas. First, the meaning of your communication isn't what you intend it to be, it's the response you get. So if someone misunderstands you, taking 100% responsibility means it's on you to find a better way to say it. Second, and this is a big one, if what you're doing isn't working, do something different. Just saying the same thing louder almost never works. And third, the person with the most flexibility in how they communicate is the one who ultimately guides the entire interaction.
So, how does this actually play out in a real conversation? Well, it happens through something called the communication feedback loop. This model shows us the communication isn't just a straight line from one person to another, but it's this continuous cycle of action and reaction.
So the cycle works like this. Someone's external behavior, what they say or do, triggers an internal response inside of you. That internal response then drives your own external behavior, which then goes and triggers an internal response in them. You see? It's this constant, powerful feedback loop that just keeps going.
Now, the most critical part of this whole loop is that internal response. This is where your power is. It's the moment where you get to choose your next move. It's made up of your internal process, that little voice in your head, the pictures you're imagining, and your internal state, which is the actual emotion you feel, whether it's anger or curiosity or frustration.
Okay, to make this crystal clear, let's look at a real-world example. We're going to follow the story of a father, Dan, and his teenage son, Drew, to see how managing that internal response can lead to two dramatically different outcomes from the exact same situation. So here's the scene. Dan has had a horrible day at work. The air conditioning was broken, it was hot, he's just miserable. He gets home, and all he's looking forward to is relaxing with a cold drink on a freshly mown lawn, which his son Drew had promised he would cut. But as he pulls into the driveway, the grass is still long. This is the external event. This is the trigger. Okay, in scenario one, Dan just lets his internal response, all that anger and frustration, take over. He storms into the house, ranting and blaming Drew. What does Drew do? He immediately gets defensive, they start shouting, and doors get slammed. A total communication disaster. But in scenario two, Dan notices his anger. He takes a breath, just interrupting that automatic reaction. And instead of making an accusation, he asks a question. This tiny bit of flexibility completely changes Drew's response. Drew explains the mower's broken, and the outcome? They fix it together and then have a pleasant meal. Same trigger, totally different results, all because Dan chose to manage his internal response.
So the crucial point here is that Dan had a choice. But why do we have these different reactions in the first place? Why did Dan's first impulse lead to an explosion? Well, the answer lies in our brain's incredibly powerful and mostly unconscious mental filters. These filters literally dictate how we experience the world. Think about this.
According to research by the psychologist George Miller, our senses are being bombarded with millions of bits of information every single second, but our conscious mind can only handle about 7 of those bits at any given time. So to keep us from going completely insane, our brain has to filter all that data out.
And it does this incredible magic trick using 3 main processes: deletion, distortion, and generalization. These aren't just little psychological quirks. They are the fundamental tools that build our unique map of reality. And understanding them is the key to understanding other people and, frankly, ourselves.
So first up is deletion. This is when our brain just selectively pays attention to certain things while completely ignoring others. It's how you can focus on a conversation in a really loud room. It's essential for concentration. But it also means we are constantly missing information that's right there in front of us.
The source material gives a perfect and pretty hilarious example of this. A woman was running late for work one morning, and she grabbed her handbag, her briefcase, and the bag of garbage she meant to put out. Her brain was so hyper-focused on catching the bus that it just deleted the information about what was in her hand, until the smell finally broke through the filter. That is deletion in action.
Next, we have distortion. This is when we take the information that's coming in and we kind of twist it to mean something that isn't necessarily true. We might see what we want to see, or maybe what we're afraid we'll see, just to reinforce a belief we already have. Our mind is basically changing the data to fit our internal map of the world.
Here's a great story from the text that illustrates this perfectly. A woman named Ramilla was driving late at night in a misty rain, and she saw this white, floating figure by the side of the road. Her heart started pounding as her mind just screamed, "Ghost!" She was absolutely convinced until she got closer and realized it was a homeless person wrapped in white plastic sheeting. Her mind distorted this ambiguous image into her biggest fear. And the third filter is generalization. This is actually how we learn. If you touch a hot stove once and get burned, you generalize that all hot stoves are dangerous. It's incredibly useful, but it can also be really limiting. If you have one bad experience giving a speech, you might generalize that you're bad at public speaking, which then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Now these filters, along with our values and beliefs, they create our personality patterns. A classic example is the difference between introverts and extroverts. It's not that one is better than the other, they just have different programs for filtering the world. An introvert recharges by being alone, while an extrovert recharges by being around people. They've just generalized different experiences as being restorative, all based on their own internal wiring.
Okay, so we've got the 100% responsibility rule, we've got the communication feedback loop, and we've got the mental filters that shape our reality. Now for the big question. How do we put all of this together to actually become better communicators? Let's get to the practical steps.
Master communicators consistently follow a 3-step process. It starts before they even open their mouths. First, they know the precise outcome they want from the conversation. Second, as the conversation is happening, they notice everything. They're paying super close attention to the verbal and nonverbal responses they're getting back. And finally, and this is the most crucial part, they have the flexibility to flex, to change their approach on the fly until they get the response that moves them closer to their goal.
This quote from the source just sums it all up perfectly. Engage your brain before your mouth. Instead of just reacting emotionally like Dan did in that first scenario, just pause. Think about the result you actually want, a mown lawn and a peaceful evening, and then choose the words and actions that are most likely to get you there.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Which of your go-to mental filters, the things you unconsciously delete or distort or generalize, is shaping your world the most right now? Because just becoming aware of that filter is the very first step to taking 100% responsibility and truly mastering your communication.